guys, it's Ginger. I'm here today with a special video that has to do with some things that have happened in 2014 that make me real happy that that year is over with. Some of it is personal health issues, and some of it is that we've had a lot of death in the family, and some of our friendship groups and things like that. So I'll start out by talking about some of the death that has occurred this year. We've had quite a few. We've had 2 deaths in our immediate family, and then I've had several friends die this year. And it was happening so rapidly and so near each other that I was starting to get a little paranoid. I was like, do I really, you know, trying to... I like to try and be light when it comes to certain things, because I do try and find the humor in certain things whenever you can. But I was like, do I really want to go to sleep? People keep dropping. It was starting to become alarming at one point. My grandmother died towards the beginning of the year. Then one of my cousin's husbands died, and he was very young, and it was unexpected. Then a friend of mine and my mom's died, and he was only like 51, and it was unexpected from a heart attack. Then I had a friend who had an accident like 20 years ago and was in a incapacitated type state. That may not even be the right word for it, but she had been in a state where she couldn't do for herself. Like, her brain still functioned properly, and she knew what was going on, but she couldn't walk, she couldn't talk, you know, she couldn't feed herself, that sort of thing. And she died a week after the other friend died. One of my great aunts died. And that's just a sampling. In all, it was probably somewhere in the neighborhood of a dozen people that we were either related to, friends with, acquaintances, you know, some kind of regular interacting with type of thing, or people who I had had dealings with on a regular basis in the past. So already by the summertime, when we were only about halfway through people dying, who would have been the total number of 12 by the end of the year, I was already like, I'll be glad when this year's over, because it was already emotionally taxing as it was. I had a later in the late part of the year, like right around October, the end of October, there were several things that had happened. I had an issue at work, and then right around the same time I had an issue with someone stealing my debit card information and making purchases on it, and luckily it was found out in enough time. But those all kind of paled in comparison, those small things that happened at the end of the year, although it added to my stress level, kind of paled in comparison to what was coming. It was in the early part of October. Well, let's see. Let me start at the beginning. In June of 2013, there was an incident where I was taking a shower and was just about finished washing my hair and about to get out of the shower, and my eyes went kind of wonky, almost like when you feel like you're gonna pass out, that kind of blurred double vision type of thing, almost like when you see snow on a television screen. It's almost like that, but it's happening in front of your eyes, and you'll blink to try and get rid of it, but it wouldn't go away, and I started feeling like I was going to pass out. And I kind of coaxed myself into not passing out. I was like willing myself not to pass out. this was early on a weekday morning, and I didn't want anybody to find me passed out and naked and wet on my bathroom floor. So I was literally saying to myself out loud, don't pass out, don't pass out. So I was able to get out of the shower and get my towel, and I went and sort of leaned myself across the bed, trying to, you know, wait for whatever was happening to pass. And it did pass. I never actually passed out, but it was really scary, and it took about 10 minutes for it to pass. I called my mother, my parents, and my mother took me to a emergency center, and I was examined. They took my blood. They did a CAT scan, and that's all they can do at those type of places. It was a neighbor's emergency, and that's all they can sort of do is take CAT scans or x-rays and things like that. So the doctor on staff suggested that I go see a neurologist. Well, my dad has a neurologist that our family trusts, that he's been using for quite a few years now. And so we made an appointment to see him. And again, this was in the summer of 2013. I went to the appointment, and he suggested that I have an MRI. At that time, I was having, my money was tight, and I had not come even close to meeting my deductible. So I was feeling fine. Like the next day I went to work and stuff like that. So I decided not to have it. In the past, I had had an issue with feeling dizzy. And I kind of equated it to this, even though I had never felt like I was going to pass out or faint. I had had dizzy spells in the past, which were later associated with, I think, with high blood pressure. Back before I had lost weight, I had been diagnosed with high blood pressure and had been put on high blood pressure medicine. Fairly high doses of high blood pressure medicine. So, but the doctors had always said it was because at that time when I was having those dizzy spells, I did not have high blood pressure. So they always said it was vertigo, which I have come to feel that. And again, I'm not a doctor. I don't have any medical background or anything like that. I'm just telling you that my experience of this, just my experience, my personal experience, and my personal thoughts about things. But my personal opinion is that when doctors can't exactly figure out what's going wrong with you and you have a clear, clean MRI, they chalk it up to vertigo. That's just like the label that they give something when you're dizzy and they can't figure out what's causing it. So I'd been diagnosed with vertigo. It hadn't happened in a good long time. So I really couldn't afford to get the MRI, and so I passed on it. Well, then in May of last year, 2014, I was at a concert with a friend of mine at a club. It's called the Scout Bar in Friendswood. I think it's called Friendswood, Texas, or Webster, Texas. And we went there to see a band called the Winery Dogs. And usually when you go to a club and see a band, there's going to be like 2 or 3 opening acts. And it was a Friday night when we went to see the band. I'm not too keen about going to concerts on a Friday night because I prefer to not have to work the whole day, you know, and then go to a concert, because concerts can be physically taxing, especially when you're in a crowd, it's hot and things like that. I like to be full energy, so I don't feel completely worn out, you know, that night and the next day. But we wanted to see this band. This was the only night that they were going to be playing, so we went, and I had not felt well earlier that day. I had felt like cold, and things like that. Like maybe I was about to get sick. I wasn't running fever or anything like that, but I felt tired and things like that. But I went to the concert anyway. I was like, ugh, I'm just feeling tired. You know, it's just one of those weeks. It's the end of the week. I'm just feeling tired. So we went. I made it really well through the first two, the two opening acts. And when the main act came on, I probably made it about halfway through the concert. And this particular bar is known for being, especially when you're near the front of the stage, which we like to do when we're in a standing room only. We get there early so we can be as close to the front of the stage as we can get. This particular club is known for it to be really hot inside there. When you've got all these people packed in, it's known to be really hot, especially when you're really in the crowd. So about halfway through the main act's set, I started getting really hot all of a sudden. And I thought, well, you know what? I need to go get some water. I haven't had any water since we've been here. So let me go get some water. So I told my friend, I said, I'm gonna go get some water. I didn't tell her I was feeling strange, but I told her I'm gonna go get some water. I need to cool off. I'm hot. I made it all the way to the back from the stage. So you have the stage, and then there's a bar directly in the back, and then there's a bar on the side as well. But I went directly to the back and ordered a bottled water and was still feeling really bad, and I was like, oh my God, don't pass out. I was like, I feel like I'm gonna pass out. And I stood there holding on to the bar, and the woman gave me the water, and I took a couple of drinks, and then I was holding on to the bar with one hand and kind of standing perpendicular to it. Is that what it is? Perpendicular when you're like that? And it was, I never lost consciousness, but it was like I didn't have control over what was happening. Do you know what I mean? I was like, oh my God, I'm going to pass out. But I never really lost consciousness. But I went down. I went down. Luckily, I didn't fall like a ton of bricks or like a log. I went down on my knees and then went back. So I never hit my head or anything like that. And it all happened in slow motion. And it just so happened that some of the band members from the first opening act was back there watching the main group play. And some of them actually picked me up, and I was like a rag doll. They picked me up, and then one of the people who worked at the club took me to a fenced-in area where people typically go to smoke. And he took me out there so I could get some air. And I called my friend, and I was like, oh my God, I almost passed out at the bar. And after I got my wits about me, because she couldn't find me because she couldn't figure out which bar it was that I was at. So we finally found each other after I got my wits about me, and she was like, do you want to leave? And I was like, no, I hate to leave. You know, they're not done yet. And so we sat on the area where the sidebar was, which was a lot more open. There were tables where you could sit, and so we sat there for about another hour, because the band played for about another hour. And you know, I started feeling better. I actually drove home that night, and then I went to my doctor, my regular doctor, on that Monday, because I was worn slap out that weekend, because we still had Saturday and Sunday, and I was worn out. But I went to work on Monday. I went to my regular doctor, a regular doctor's appointment on Monday that I scheduled because I told him that I had been sick. I needed to see him. And he diagnosed me with a bacterial infection. And he gave me some antibiotics. And I was like, so do you think that that's the reason that I passed out, you know, or almost passed out, was that I got overheated and then I was getting sick? And he was like, yeah, that's probably it. So gave me that. I was fine after that. Nothing happened for months and months. It did scare me though. but I chalked it up to being either on the verge of getting sick or already being sick and then getting a little overheated. And I felt fine after that, and nothing happened for months. Well, then in October, my friend and I were at the Motley Crue Alice Cooper concert. It was for their farewell tour. And we had just gotten there. It was the beginning of October. It was like October 11th, and it was unseasonably cool weather for Houston. I mean, because typically you can go, and this was an outdoor venue, you can typically go to this outdoor venue in early October and sweat your balls off. It gets that hot even in early October in Texas. So we were excited that it was so cool. We were like, yeah, you know, we don't have to worry about getting overheated and, you know, drinking gallons of water, you know, like a dog. We have to have a bowl of water like a dog or anything like that. So we were standing in line getting shirts before the concert started, and I started feeling funny. And I was like, oh God, don't tell me this is happening again. So I said, I need to go sit down. I said, I'm feeling weird. And of course, my friend was on high alert about it because she was the same friend that was with me when I nearly passed out at that bar. So I went and sat down on the steps. She went and got me some water. By the time she got back, I was fine. And we went on to the rest and watched the rest of the concert, and I was perfectly fine the rest of the night. But I told her, I said, I can't believe this happened again. I guess I'm going to have to go to the doctor. So I went back to see that neurologist that I had seen in 2013 and told him, you know, that since I had seen him prior, that I'd had 2 more instances where I felt like I was going to pass out. So, and then the one where I did actually go down. And so he said, okay. And I told him, I said, I've never had the MRI because I couldn't afford it. Stupid me. And so he said, okay, well, we'll order an MRI. We'll get some blood work from you for today, and we'll see what's going on. So I went right after that appointment and got some blood work done, and they took tons of blood. They ended up taking 14 vials of blood because he was testing me for MS and lupus and other types of blood disorders that might cause some kind of neurological reaction. So I had the blood test done. Then he said, okay, we'll get an MRI. Well, I had to wait several days because my insurance company requires pre-authorization before you can have an MRI done. So it's not like they can make the appointment for the next day. So it took a couple of days for the MRI to take place. And this is all at the beginning of November. It was like right at the beginning of November. So it was probably the second week of November or something like that before I was able to get the MRI. And so I had the MRI. They actually took 4 different types of images. And we were scheduled to go. My mom and I went back to see the neurologist. I was like, can we please do this before Thanksgiving? Because I want to get the test results before Thanksgiving. It's a long weekend. We knew that the test results would be in by then and things like that. And I was like, oh my God, can we just not have to, you know, go through the holidays wondering what's going on? So my appointment was the day before Thanksgiving, and which was like November 26th. They got us into the room. The doctor came in and he was questioning me again about why, what had happened. What had happened back in 2013, what had happened in 2014. He wanted me to go over it all again. I was like, well, I told you about that incident in 2013. And he was acting like he'd never heard it before. But I was like, that is so weird. So he's like, I'm going to go look at your MRIs And, well, he said, we got your blood work back. I'm sorry. We got your blood work back. Your blood work is fine. He said the only thing we found in your blood work was that your B12 is a little low, but not low enough to cause you any neurological problems. So he was like, I'm going to go look at your MRIs and I'll be right back. So he was gone for kind of a long time, and the door was still open on the exam room, and I noticed he was kind of across the hallway in another room that had computers in it, and there was a bunch of other people in there. And I thought maybe he was giving test results to somebody else, but now looking back at it, he was discussing my images with some other people that were there, some other doctors and, you know, things like that. So, he walked away, and all those people left that room, and then the nurse came and got us and brought us into the room where I had seen the doctor and all those people. And my mom didn't say anything, but she told me later that when we walked in that room and she saw my MRI, one of my MRIs on the computer screen, she was like, there's something wrong, because they've never had my dad go into that room and look at his MRI before. So she felt like something was wrong. We waited there for quite a little bit, and then he finally came in. And it is kind of unnerving to sit there and before the doctor came in and see a picture of your brain on the computer screen, and you're looking at it and you're seeing things on it. And I was like, there's something on here. There's something on here. And I don't know what it is, but I can tell that there's something on here, because there was a couple of big white splotches on the pictures. So he came in there and he asked me again. He goes, are you sure you haven't had a head injury? You know, you weren't in a car accident or anything like that? And I said, no, I've just had those instances where I thought that I was going to pass out. And he said, the only other MRI we have on file for you is from 2009. And later on we thought about it, and that would make sense, because that's probably one that was done when I was having the problems with the vertigo. Because that was before I was diagnosed with a blood pressure issue. He said that there was nothing on the scans from 2009. They were completely clear. There was nothing there. And I was like, okay. And he started moving this image around, and he looked at me, and the way he looked at me was almost like he didn't know what to say, which was kind of alarming. And he said, there are 2 lesions on your brain that were not here in 2009. And he goes, they've been here for a while. He goes, at least a year. And I was stunned. He was stunned. He said, he goes, and I don't even know what to tell you I don't know what to tell you. Because I wasn't expecting to find this. I mean, he said that. He goes, I was not expecting to find this, because there was nothing in 2009, and now there is something. The 2 lesions, which is what they call them, and it's basically scarring on your brain. As my dad has a history. He had a stroke many years ago, and then he's had many strokes through the years, so he has a number of lesions on his brain from those strokes, which is scarring that's on your brain. So he pointed to them and explained the main one that was significant is one that's back here in the lower part on what's called the cerebellum. And if you look on the brain, you have a part that's down here at the base of your brain that's kind of round and, what do you call it? Ridgy, I guess. Round and ridgy, that's at the base of your skull. And that's your cerebellum. So one of the lesions is on my cerebellum. And the other one is in the top part inside the brain. And he told me, he said, the reason I asked you if you were in a car accident or if you had some kind of head trauma, he said, because I don't see these kind of lesions in people, or let me say that again. He said, I usually only see these kind of lesions in people who've been in car accidents or who have had some kind of severe head trauma. And I was like, okay. I haven't been in a car accident since I was a teenager. And I had not hit my head or anything like that. So my mom said, she goes, are you sure that you're not seeing a tumor? And she said, and he said, there is no tumor. These are not characteristic of tumors. He goes, these are characteristic of either a stroke or MS. And he said, I can't even say that it was a stroke. He said, because it doesn't have, the scarring does not have the normal characteristics of someone who's had a stroke. Plus, I did not have the symptoms characteristic of someone who had a stroke. I never had any weakness or slurred speech or trouble walking or anything like that. I just had the instances where I thought I was going to pass out. And they all passed really fast. There was no lasting effects from it. So he said that, you know, and I kind of just sat there kind of shocked and stoic, taking in everything he had to say, and my mom kind of took over asking questions. But it was alarming to see that look on his face, like, I have no clue what has happened type of look. And it was almost funny because at one point you could tell that it was I'm trying to make it sound I'm trying to make it not sound like I'm trying to make it not sound macabre. He was intrigued. I won't say he was excited by what he saw, but he was intrigued. He even said that that scar on my cerebellum was, he either said magnificent or significant. I can't remember which one it was, but it's something that's usually, I think he may have said magnificent or something to that effect. It was something that you would normally say, that it's normally used in a positive way, but he was just astonished by the size of it and the fact that I hadn't had any head trauma. So he was like, we want to run some more tests. He goes, I want to do another MRI, this time one without and with contrast. He said, then we'll see what that looks like, and we will determine where we need to go from there. And, you know, of course, my mom was asking, you know, what could it be aside from a stroke? And he said, it could be MS. He goes, but we want to do another MRI. He said, and if we can't exactly determine what it is, the only other option I would have would be to do a spinal tap to test for MS, because he could not say with certainty that it was a stroke because of the characteristics of the lesions. So I did another MRI. I had to wait a couple of weeks actually, because again, the insurance company had to have pre-approval, and they were trying to say that they were not going to approve it because it was similar to some other tests that I had already had. And then finally, they had to submit it twice before the insurance company would approve it. And he said, okay, we want to do another MRI, plus we want to do a scope that goes down into your esophagus and looks at the back side of your heart. Because sometimes you can have a hole in your heart and not know it on the back side of your heart, and it can cause a stroke. Many of you may remember that after Bret Michaels, the singer Bret Michaels, had a stroke, it was discovered that he had a hole in the back of his heart. So apparently those two things were tied together, so they wanted to check and make sure. So this was on so we had to go through Thanksgiving before I had that scope done. So he actually called a cardiologist that I had already gone to in the past, who had dealt with my high blood pressure issues in the past, and set up an appointment for me to get a consultation with him so that I could have that scope. So I went in on that Monday after Thanksgiving and had the consultation. It had been a while since I'd been to him, so I had to have an echocardiogram, which is, yeah, it's totally thrilling. It's where you get to take your top and your bra off in front of a complete stranger. They squirt goo on your chest, and then they take what looks like an ultrasound little dealy, and they run it all over the center of your chest trying to see it. And I remember at one point that girl was trying to get a shot. She's a very nice lady. She was talking to me the whole time. She was very nice, but at one point she was jamming that thing so hard into my boob I wanted to go, there's breast tissue there, thank you, it's not gonna move. But so I had the echo, and then he set up the appointment with me at the local hospital, in the local hospital's cath lab, to have that scope done for the next day. So I had that done the next day. They worked me in for that next day because they wanted me to get it done so fast. That the doctor there in the cath lab worked me in. So I ended up being there almost all day to have that procedure done. And what they do is they come in there, they give you like a sedative. They don't knock you out. At least not in this case. They didn't knock me out. They gave me a combination of a sedative and a pain medication, which was supposed to relax me. But because they want you to be awake, because they give you commands during it. So then the doctor comes in. Well, they give you this stuff in a cup that's almost the consistency of honey, and it tastes nasty. And they make you drink that, and they make you kind of hold it in your throat because they're trying to deaden your throat. So they do that, and then the doctor also sprayed something down in my throat that tasted awful too. That was like an extra deadener. Then they they put this plastic thing in your mouth that keeps your mouth open. And then they jam this tube with a camera on it, down into your throat. And it wasn't pleasant. It didn't hurt, but it wasn't pleasant. And I coughed a lot of the time because I have a really sensitive gag reflex. So I coughed a lot of the time, and they were like, swallow, swallow, swallow. And I did really well, though. I didn't throw a punch or anything like my mom probably would have done. You don't try and stick anything down my mother's throat, or she'll kick you or punch you. She's warned doctors of that before. But But I was not, maybe the sedative was just supposed to be a light sedative, although one of the doctors had told me that he had to convince a patient one time that they had actually done the procedure because the guy could not remember. It gave him amnesia. He could not remember having had the procedure, but I knew exactly what was going on the whole time. And so he did it. He had me cough and things like that. So it didn't take that long to do it, but we kind of had to wait all day because they were working us in. And we got the test results right then before I even left. They said that my heart was fine, that I didn't have a hole in my heart. The only things that he saw were confirmations of things that my cardiologist already knew. I have a mitral valve issue with a slight leak, and then I have an aortic valve issue, which the cardiologist already knew about, but he said are not uncommon and are not significant. So that test was down. So we were still at that point waiting for the MRI, excuse me. We were still waiting for the MRI to get approved, and it was getting closer to Christmas. And then finally the MRI was approved, and they went ahead and did the second MRI with and without contrast. And when they do contrast, they actually inject the contrast into your vein and take some pictures. And so he got it back, and we went back again just before Christmas, and he said that it was probably mid-December when we went back, and he said that that second MRI, he looked at it, the characteristics of it, he could not diagnose it as a stroke because the characteristics of it were not that of a stroke. And I didn't have any of the symptoms of a stroke. So he said, what we can do, he goes, if you want to, he goes, this is more, he said it's more characteristic. He said it had, well, excuse me, let me rephrase that. He said it has some of the characteristics of multiple It has some of the characteristics of multiple sclerosis, but he said, I can't know for sure. He said, because you don't have any of the symptoms. He said, so the only thing I can do to find out for sure is to test your spinal fluid, which would mean doing a spinal tap. I was not too jazzed about that. And he's not too jazzed about it either. He's the type of doctor who, you know, seriously invasive type things are, he's very good at them, but seriously invasive things is the last thing he wants to do to a patient. So he said, look, he said that you can do the spinal tap or you don't have to do the spinal tap. He said because it could be negative, which would be good. He said, or even if it was positive for MS, you're not symptomatic, and I wouldn't treat you for it until you were symptomatic. He said, so it's up to you on what you want to do. He said, and any neurologist would tell you this. He goes, I feel perfectly comfortable if you don't want to do the spinal tap. What you'll have to do is just come back in March, and we'll do another series of MRIs and, you know, go from there. You kind of reevaluate and decide what we want to do, if there's been any changes. Because basically, I'm going to have to go back at least twice a year, you know, as often as he needs me to, twice a year at least, because he said March and November I'll have to have MRIs. So I'm going to have to be one of those people who's going to have regular MRIs to make sure there's not any changes in these lesions. So I made the decision not to have the spinal tap because I wasn't too jazzed about doing that. And it was so close to the end of the year. I was like, there's no way they're going to be able to fit me in before the end of the year. So, but like you said, and I discussed it with my parents heavily with my mom, and she agreed, you know, there's no reason to have somebody stick a giant needle in my spine even if it comes out positive. There's nothing that he can do about it at this point because I'm not symptomatic. So that's where it stands. And the thing that we've kind of gleaned from all the test results, the things that the doctor has said, the different instances where I'm almost passed out, because he did say that the lesions look like they're at least a year old. So we have kind of speculated, gathered, hypothesized that it happened in June of 2013 when I had that incident where I almost passed out in the shower. So, you know, as it was, I've been living with it since that time. I haven't had any more dizzy spells like that. You know, I just have to pay attention to, you know, what my body is telling me. But the main reason that I decided to do this video was not to get any sympathy or anything like that. I wanted to let people know the experiences that I had, the symptoms that I had, so that they can go see a doctor, go get an MRI. You know, my mom feels really guilty about the fact that I didn't get the MRI back in 2013, but it wouldn't have made any difference because, I mean, we just would have went through all this a year earlier, so it wouldn't have made any difference if that was when it happened. So you're probably wondering, you know, did I get upset and things like that? And I was upset that day that I found out the news that I had those lesions, and cried a little bit. It wasn't really until I looked at my mother in the eye that I started crying, because I could see that she was worried, because I already knew in my heart that it had happened that previous year. So I had been living with it all this time, and you know, it was kind of a low weekend for me that Thanksgiving, because I was trying to process all this information that I got. And I know I went and talked to my dad because my dad has been through strokes, and that's another thing you have to know, is that for years I've worried about something like that happening, because there's a tendency for that to happen. It's almost like it's hereditary. I don't know if strokes can be hereditary, but if you have somebody in your family who's had it, you know, you have to be aware of it, because it's affected both sides of my family. Both of my maternal grandparents died from strokes. My paternal grandfather had a stroke when I was very young. He had a stroke when I was very young, but he recovered from it, and he ended up dying of a heart condition. And then my paternal grandmother also had 2 mini strokes, which she ended up surviving, but ended up dying from something else. But it's something that is significant in our family, and it's something that we watch out for. And then, of course, my dad had a stroke. He had his first stroke when he was 36 or 37. I was 15. I was like almost about to turn 16 years old when that happened. And I remember my parents' anniversary is just a couple of weeks before my birthday, and my dad was in the hospital when my parents celebrated their anniversary, and he was still in the hospital when my 16th birthday came around. So I didn't have, you know, my parents weren't able to throw me a sweet 16 birthday party. My friends kind of threw me an impromptu sweet 16 because they knew that my dad was in the hospital. And he did okay for quite a long time, but then in the last several years he's had several mini strokes now that he's gotten a lot older. But his stroke was brought on by his original stroke was brought on by something that was, the doctors believe it was just one of those things. It was a weak blood vessel in his brain that tore and caused a blood clot. They said it was the weak blood vessel was probably something he was born with. He was I think he was premature, plus he was a twin, born in the early 50s. So, you know, it was lucky that he even lived, considering that they were very small. He was only like 4.5 pounds or something like that when he was born. So the doctors said that that was probably something, that the weakness in that blood vessel was something that he was born with, and that just eventually got so weak that it tore and caused that that clot. You know, but his father had aneurysms, and my mom's father, his was actually from, it was associated with being diabetic. So we have a lot of stroke in our family. So it's something that we always watch for. And before stroke was kind of, sort of, what am I trying to say? The doctor sort of eliminated stroke as being my issue. But before we really knew what was going on, my dad, I had a conversation with my dad. He said that when I made it through my 30s, he actually breathed a sigh of relief because nothing had happened. But of course, this appears to be something different from a stroke, but it's something that I'm going to have to watch, but it's something that, you know, I'm living with, and I've been living with, unknowingly living with for a year and a half before I was, you know, before it was discovered or diagnosed or whatever. So, you know, you know, I told my mother, I said, it's amazing because, like, I've struggled with my weight for all of my adult life specifically. And I said, I've always been a weight loss underachiever, but apparently I'm a neurological overachiever because I have a lesion that only people who have car accidents end up having. So significant and big and stuff like that, you know. I'm like, wouldn't you know? That's what I would be an overachiever at. But, you know, you guys who've been watching me all this time, you know, I just want to let you know that anytime I've had a brain fart or can't find my word, it's not from that. I'm pretty sure it's not from that, because I've always been the brain farty kind of person who just, like, the word will go, woo. So, because I started this channel apparently just a couple of months after I had that incident. So, this whole time that I've been on YouTube, I've had this, unbeknownst to me. But I just want to let people know that you shouldn't ignore stuff, you know. Not that getting to this any sooner would have changed what the results were, but I guess it just would have been nice to have known earlier. you know, and in some cases for some people it might be something that is even more significant and needs to be treated. The only treatment that I'm doing now pertaining to all these tests that I've done is I'm taking B12 shots. Right now I'm doing the I'm right at the beginning of taking the B12 shots, so I'm having to take one every week for the first 4 weeks, and then one every month till the end of time, apparently. And my cardiologist has put me back on a low dose of blood pressure medicine to keep my blood pressure fairly low. I mean, not low enough to make me pass out, but fairly low to for the valve problems that he already knew that I had. You know, just to be safe, just to prevent them from getting any worse. Well, to prevent them, to slow down the speed of them getting any worse. So that's it. And like I said, I didn't want to do this video to get any kind of sympathy or anything like that. I just wanted to share my experiences and, you know, let somebody, hopefully somebody will go, hey, you know, I've had some problems, let me go to the doctor. And it may turn out to be something as benign as vertigo, you know, or it may be something more significant, you know. But there's been so much death this year in our family, in our lives, around our family, that, you know, you want to not panic, but take things seriously. You know, not put off things. Don't put off things because you can't afford it. You know, ask for a loan from somebody or put it on your credit card, you know. Not that I'm advising you to get in debt, but your health is important. So I hope I haven't brought you down, because I'm not unhappy or sad or anything like that. I mean, you guys have seen my videos. And you know, I try to be upbeat and things like that, you know, not to the point of making you want to barf, but I'm dealing with it, you know. I don't feel any different than I did before, because I always kind of paid close attention to things that were going on with me and things like that, but, you know, it's a new year, and hopefully everybody will, you know, take their health seriously. If you haven't in the past, go see a doctor. If you've got something going on, it's important, you know. And I know a lot of people, you know, a lot of people who may be watching this have children and things like that, you know. If you're a woman who's a mom, you know, you tend to ignore the stuff that's happening to yourself and worry more about what's happening with your children, but you need to take care of yourself as well. So I guess that's everything. So I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.